So my name's Aman. If we haven't been connected before, we haven't met. I'm a product manager at a company called Arize, which is where you're at today in the Zoom room. We are an evals and observability company, and we're going to talk more about what that means in just a sec. But just by way of a little bit of background, I actually have a technical background myself. So started my career in engineering and then worked on self-driving cars at a company called Cruise back in 2017, 2018 timing. Shortly after that, while I was at Cruise, I worked on evals. Interestingly enough, I worked on systems that helped engineers and decision makers decide whether or not the code that we were shipping on the car was making the car better or worse. Sounds really familiar to the agent world we live in today. In between Cruise and Arize, I actually worked at Spotify, uh, small music streaming company. Maybe you've heard of it. But it was a really amazing opportunity to work on recommender systems there. And while I was there, I actually discovered that there was this gap in observability and evals for machine learning models, even when I was at Spotify. And that's actually what got me to look for a tool in the space, which is how I discovered Arize. And Arize is actually, Spotify is actually one of our customers at Arize now. So we're really lucky to work with some amazing companies I'm going to show in just a second. But a lot of our learnings and lessons kind of come from this journey of working with startups, digital native, AI native companies, getting their AI systems to production. And I'm still really lucky I get to work on eval systems to this day, from the start of my career. So what we're going to cover is we're going to talk a little bit about the AI PM role. I see some AI product managers in the chat, which is awesome. We'll definitely talk a little bit about what's changing in that role and some of the observations that I'm kind of noticing from working with these companies. And then we'll talk about eval journeys, where your company might be today if you're working on AI products at your company or in your team. And then we're kind of rounded out with how to work with AI engineers on evals and how to actually collaborate on evaluations so that as a PM, you're actually contributing back to the quality of the end product. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about what that means and some of the workflows around that. So a little bit about us. So I've been really lucky in this past year. It's been an amazing journey to kind of share more about learnings around evaluations for AI agents and AI products. Here's just a couple of resources I'll point you towards. Feel free to look them up afterwards, and there'll be a link at the end as well to find some of these. But we've been lucky to do a free course with Deep Learning AI, Andrew Ng, on evaluating AI agents, totally free. We have a lot of folks try that out. It's sort of their first touch when it comes to actually writing evals from scratch. So it's a hands-on course. So I highly recommend checking that out. And we also did a newsletter with Lenny's podcast. It's actually number three most read of this last year, which is on evals for product managers. So highly recommend checking that out as well. It's a great post to just sort of cover what are the foundations of evals for AI products. And then we've also kind of been lucky to work with some PMs from the best orgs and the AI orgs in the world. I mentioned Spotify, but we also work with companies like Duolingo, Uber, Reddit, Instacart, DoorDash, and so many others. And here's just a snippet of some of our logos of the companies we're lucky to work with. I particularly like this quote on the left, which is, this is really how teams are building today. This is how they're building AI products. They have Cursor on one screen and Arize on the other. And we recently, this earlier this year, closed our Series C. So we're going to be around for a while, building, actually raised funding from Microsoft, Datadog, and a number of others. So we're lucky to work with hundreds of customers on our AX enterprise platform, as well as with Phoenix, which is open source. And I'll touch a little bit about on Phoenix as well. So if you can't get started for some reason on security or some other kind of reason internally, if you're blocked on getting started with Arize AX, we're happy to chat, but also happy to direct you to our open source tools that are easier to kind of stand up in your own environment as well. But today, what we're going to talk about is mostly foundational. It's mostly going to be about how you can get started with evals as an AI PM. And really, we're going to focus more around workflows. Some of this might feel familiar, but happy to take any questions as they come as well. If you drop them in the chat, I'll keep an eye out. But really, let's start with kind of a foundation. What is an AI product manager? And really, what kind of AI PM are you or do you aspire to be? So I kind of view the world as sort of three types of AI PMs. There's the sort of, let's start with the one on the right, which is the AI platform PM. This is the person who is responsible for making sure that models are kind of working across the company. They're, whatever LLM APIs you're using, or if you're using Anthropic, you're using OpenAI or something else, that you are managing the right data across the company. So when if you're sending user data or PII or something that might be sensitive, that you're actually managing that correctly in sort of a platformized way and selecting the right models and strategy. There's the AI powered PM. This is one I personally feel deeply, which is you're going beyond just prompting guides. And maybe you're using tools like Cursor to actually help you accomplish your job as a product manager. If you follow along, I'll be sharing more around personal operating system and being able to build your own personal OS. But really, I kind of view AI powered PMs, they're building agents to help them accomplish their own workflows in a more kind of fast and efficient way, but also be more effective at their job when it comes to collaborating across stakeholders. So this is definitely sort of the new skill set I think a lot of PMs are starting to embrace, which is using AI more effectively in their job. And then last but not least, the focus of today, we're going to kind of really center around this AI product PM role. And this is the person that cares about what does the AI form factor look like in our end product? Should we be shipping a chatbot? Should we be incorporating RAG? Or should this be a background agent that's really taking action across our data and doing this sort of, in the background? And so it's not actually maybe even something that the user is facing on the first touch. And this person is really, really usually the person that's on the team working with their AI engineers, and they're the ones that are sort of in the weeds on evaluations. So they're collaborating with AI engineers, they're collaborating with their stakeholders to define what good means and being able to measure that across the product. The short version of this, though, I'll kind of say is like, I do really think these circles are going to be overlapping more and more as time goes on because AI is going to be in pretty much every single product we use, just like the database. So it'll kind of go away. Like an AI PM will just become some type of PM because AI is going to be how we work. It's going to be how we manage models. It's going to be how we run evals on our products as well. So maybe a mental model for you as you kind of think about yourself and your role. And really, the AI PM doesn't work in a vacuum, right? Like you're working with technical users, you're working with technical people on your team, like engineers, developers, maybe prior data scientists are building models. And those folks are usually responsible for code, automation, pipelines, frameworks when standing up the AI product in the first place. On the other hand, we also see a lot of teams with domain experts. These are subject matter experts, like people that are legal experts or medical experts, depending on the enterprise or business that you're building, that are experts in a specific area. And they might be collaborating with the product manager to help write prompts, write evals, and label data. And this is kind of a collaboration across the entire team. And I really kind of view this line or barrier sort of breaking down as we think about who's actually collaborating and working on evals. So really, like, think about this as evals are the way that you get visibility across your organization on how your AI system is performing, from your user experience all the way through to the product quality and laddering up to metrics and KPIs. Okay, let's hop into eval journeys really quick. It's Q4, 2025. We're all living this right now, right? It's November. Is anyone else in H1 planning? Feel free to drop in the chat. I know I am. Are we sort of thinking about what's going on next year? Hey, we need to get the stakeholders aligned, get our docs in. Who else is in H1 planning right now? Definitely not just me. I'm pretty sure people in this room have it. Oh my gosh, yeah, you have it in January. Okay, so maybe some folks are, maybe this is a little bit ahead for some people, but you're in this planning mode, right? And I remember reading somewhere, I don't remember where, that it was the year of agents, right? 2025 is the year of agents. But where are all of these agents that we were promised this year? This is what a lot of executive leadership are asking themselves in this moment. It's discussions that we're hearing across our customers as well in their organizations. Hey, we had a team working on agents. They were working on it throughout this entire year, but it's not launched yet. Or if it's launched, it's an internal test. It's not even working the way it's supposed to. Well, what do executives like to do in this type of situation, or CPOs or CTOs? Sorry, if you are a CPO or CTO, this is going to poke fun of you a little bit, but maybe a hackathon will fix this. Like maybe that's what we need. We need to get everyone in a room. We're going to take a week, the week before Thanksgiving or whatever. We're going to make everyone build AI systems and agents. We're going to get stuff out there, right? It's going to work great. That's what's going to solve our problem. Well, what will end up happening? In this world, let's put on our hat and pretend we're now doing a hackathon and we're the PM on this team. And this is something we have to do ourselves too, by the way. This is an experience I actually went through myself as well, even at an AI company. And the first thing you do is usually you build the agent or the AI product. Let's think about this for a sec. Maybe it's a prototype for a customer support bot on top of our documentation. It's something I wish we had in our product, right? Where you can just go in and you ask questions and get answers back. And when you ship that, maybe you've taken the docs, you've chunked them up, you've built an agent that can do RAG and look up documentation, maybe even do a web search, maybe it even makes API calls. And it's something we built really, really quick. A little ambitious, but we shipped it. And it works for some users, maybe, right? This works for our internal users. It works for when I want to test out the product, and maybe it's working sometimes. But we also know that you're going to have users that complain. Like if you actually show this to people beyond your team or to another team, they're going to say, "Hey, this thing doesn't work, right? It's not ready yet. I gave it like three questions and two out of the three were wrong. One was correct. Okay, great." And the reality is that for a lot of internal use cases, I actually think this is fine. Vibe coding, or it says no evals, but really this is vibe evals. This is just looking at the output. I think that it is perfectly okay to have vibe evals in your product and use vibe evals to make product decisions, as long as those products aren't driving business outcomes, as long as they're not actually things you're going to be using for using data to make analysis or do analysis or make business decisions or show to an end customer. If you're just building a prototype and you want to get like a quick UI, UX taste or try out a new agent framework, this is perfectly fine for a prototype. But if you actually want to start getting this prototype or this POC that you're in into production, you've probably heard this term of evals. You need evals. People need to be building evals. Well, what are evals and why do they matter? The reality is that we know this is true. LLMs hallucinate. But our job is to make sure that they don't embarrass us, our company, or our brand. And you don't have to take my word for it. The CPOs of the companies that are selling us LLMs are literally saying the same thing. They're telling us that writing evals is going to become important to actually measure the outputs of these systems. You have CPO of Anthropic. If there's one thing we can teach people, it's that writing evals is probably the most important thing. So don't take my word for it. It's literally the people selling you the product saying you should probably be thinking about evals. And this is something that I hear quite often from engineers and from engineering teams. Well, we just treat evals as unit tests, right? Why is the product manager even getting involved in this discussion? Evals are just a unit test. Let me go do my job. I'm going to go write evals, get away from here, product manager, go back to writing specs. Why are you in this part of the office? This is not where the customers or PM should be. The reality is that I actually think that the way that we think about evals is actually a little bit different than traditional software testing. Priyanka has a great question of frameworks for building traces, spans, and observability. We're going to come to that in a little bit, actually, Priyanka. It's a good question. But think about unit testing and software testing as closer to a bullet train on a track, where you're actually, if you're, doesn't really apply on the East Coast as much because the trains are never on time. But if you're in a place like Japan, when you get on a train at 10 o'clock, it's supposed to arrive somewhere at 11 o'clock. It's going to arrive there at that time. And that's because of years of rigorous testing at a system and integration and unit level to make sure that the train is reliable. Evals are closer to a driving test where you're actually trying to measure how the system behaves in a sort of a complex, chaotic environment. So think of this more like driving a car in New York, right? The environment is changing. Maybe the way that, what you're perceiving pedestrians in the street, how that kind of works is going to be constantly changing as well. And so what you're trying to measure, not everyone drives the same way, but yet if you have a driver's license, you pass this test. That's closer to what evals are. And the reason for that is because LLM systems are non-deterministic. This is distinctly different than software, traditional software, where 1 + 1 = 2 100% of the time. With LLMs, when you say 1 + 1 = 3, the LLM might say, no, you're wrong, but then you can keep arguing with it back and forth, and eventually you're going to get, you're absolutely right. 1 + 1 = 3. Here's why. And the reason for that is because these systems are, that's sort of the way that they're designed and the way that they work is that they are non-deterministic systems. On top of that, there's one really key important difference here, which is improving agents actually relies on real world data versus when you think about software testing, integration tests and unit tests really rely on the code base and existing documentation. So evals are the way that you measure what's good. They can act like regression tests or benchmarks for your system, but they're really important to help give you signal on what to go and debug in your product. You shouldn't just blindly trust evals, which we're going to get into, but you should use evals as a signal for being able to figure out what's going on in your data. Here's a few common types of evals that you've heard of or probably may have heard of already. The most common one that you'll hear is LLM as a judge, but there are others here as well. And I've kind of put some of the examples here of like accuracy, hallucination, Q&A. These are quote unquote off the shelf LLM as a judge evals, but really the goal should be for you and your team to develop your own personalized specific evaluations. And you can use these as like templates as a starting point, but they're not going to be where your system ends up or lands. And that's because you actually want to design data sets and evaluations around your specific failure modes and use cases. There's also code-based evals, which are simple string checks or simple code correctness checks. And this is actually really helpful from if you think about LLM as a judge or human annotation, these are subjective measures. But code-based evals are more deterministic. They're doing things like making sure that the output from the system, if it's supposed to be a JSON, is that it's always JSON 100% of the time, or never mention a competitor in the output. And so that's really useful because it's also super easy and cheap to run these code-based checks. Human annotation is where a lot of teams start to look at evals, which is labeling data, looking at data, labeling it. Really, really key and important as part of the workflow. But all of these only really matter in service of the end business metric, which is this might be something like your human in the loop or how often a downstream user or customer gives you negative feedback on their experience using the product. What's your NPS? Are you actually converting this user? These are the things that really matter to the end business. And evals can help you get a signal on how your AI system is performing so that you can actually get a sense of, is this business metric actually moving from the work that we're doing? So let's go one level deeper here. What is an LLM as a judge system? It's really just these three components. It's an eval prompt, which is defining what should be evaluated. There's the LLM, which is the cost, performance, latency, accuracy. And this is really the things that you can measure with the LLM system. It's like which LLM are you using, which model? And then you actually have the data. Here's a few example columns of the data that you're going to be evaluating, but it's input, output, maybe it's expected output or like what the LLM should have produced, and then the label. You can also have metadata here to help you evaluate further, but this is it. This is basically what an eval system looks like. And if you're just doing human annotation, you're just looking at the labels or at the data. But if you're doing LLM as a judge, you have this eval prompt in LLM as well. This is what the eval prompt looks like. It's just simple plain English. You're really defining the role of the LLM, which is your job is to examine written text. You're providing context, which is the text in the curly braces. And then you're setting the goal, which is examine the text, determine whether it's toxic or not, define what toxicity looks like. And then you're actually saying, here's some examples of what toxicity is, or, it looks like. So you're giving examples to help ground the LLM response as well. This is generally what we see LLM as a judge eval prompts to look like. And this is also where generally prompting looks like as well. Okay, so now that we know what evals are, let's say we've gone back to our team and we said, hey, we wrote an eval this time for our hackathon project. We built the agent and AI system, but this time we have an eval. We actually have a way to measure the output of the system. We're going to measure maybe the toxicity or the hallucination rate. We're going to make sure that when the LLM produces an output, it doesn't hallucinate. It uses the context every single time. We wrote this eval to measure that. Well, the thing is, if you go back to your team and you say, hey, I wrote this eval, their response is going to be, do we trust the eval? Show me the data. Show me what proves that you actually did the work here to make sure that this eval is reliable and that I should trust it. And there's this debate or discussion that we often see come up, which is who's actually writing the evals? And remember, this is just the eval prompt, the LLM, and the data. Well, the thing is that the person or the team that's responsible for writing the eval prompt is really closely tied to the people that are responsible for writing the labels, because the whole job of this LLM as a judge system is to be aligned with human judgment, which is these labels, the expected output and the correct or incorrect response from the LLM. So I would kind of argue that if you're a PM and you are working on an AI product, you should be in the details on the quality of your data. It doesn't mean that you need to actually write the labels. Maybe it is something that you should do, but it is definitely a part of the job to think about who is writing those labels and what the quality of those labels are, because the quality of those labels is what determines the quality of the eval. So these things are really tightly coupled together, which is you need to be in the details on the labels and the data itself. In fact, if you're outsourcing this job to another team or another job function, you're effectively outsourcing the quality of your AI system to another team if you're not in the details of the data and you're not labeling the data that's being used for evals. I think a helpful model to think about evals is also that you can think about evals as sort of requirements. And at the top level, there's things that you measure already as product requirements, right? Business or product metrics. These are sort of session or user level metrics, which are thumbs up and thumbs down. It's a noisy signal, but you can get it back from the end user. You can also get these metrics from PMs or yourself, your own self kind of labeling the data, or subject matter experts, or just by talking or surveying users. But let's take, for example, an example where the PM, I'm the PM for this customer support bot, and I'm looking at my data, and my customer, for some reason, they gave my agent a thumbs down. And let's say that they went to the agent, the customer support agent, and they asked for a refund for a flight. Let's say it's, booking a flight. And maybe the customer support agent actually went back and did this AI agent actually went and did a lookup and said, hey, based on your kind of when you asked for a refund and what your kind of, you as a user, what type of ticket you paid for, you're not eligible for a refund. Well, me as if I'm a customer of that company, I might give that agent a thumbs down because I was wanted a refund, right? Like that's a negative experience for me. But if you go and dig deeper, you might find that was the right data retrieved? Okay, even if the right data was retrieved, did the LLM use that data to make a decision correctly? Even if the LLM used the data to make a decision correctly, did they explain why the person wasn't eligible for a refund in a way that was clear and that made the customer happy? And even if all of these things are true, you might still have a user that had a negative experience and gave a thumbs down. On the flip side, let's say in this case, the customer then kind of started to coax the agent or coerce it and said, no, please promise I'll be a really good customer. I'll book a flight with you all, next week. Please, please, please give me a refund. And the agent actually gets coerced and gives a refund in that case. Well, in that case, I might give the system a thumbs up. I actually had a pretty good customer experience there. I got my money back. But you still need to be able to look in and look deep and see, were these right steps followed? And can we actually measure what the agent is doing at each of these steps to see, did we make the right decision or not in the end? And so this is sort of the three questions that I like to kind of bring up to teams to start to debate internally, which is when you're thinking about evals, you're thinking about LLM as a judge, you're thinking about building a system to do this type of automated labeling. How many human labels do you need? And for each example, do they need to agree? Because for some of these, some examples, you'll find that there's nuance in the answer, what the agent should have done. And that can help bring up, how much data you actually need to have labeled by humans to actually feel like you can trust the LLM as a judge system. Then being able to take a look at what happens when the eval is good, but the human label disagrees anyway. And this is a score that's called match rate, which you can actually measure the rate at which your subject matter experts and PMs are labeling your data, whether that matches the eval label or not. It's really helpful to look at this disagreement because then you can find opportunities to either improve on your labeling or improve on the eval itself. And then sort of last but not least here, what happens when the eval says everything is good, but the business metric goes down anyway. And how do we measure that? And by the way, I would actually argue, I don't have a slide for this, but there's a quick sort of workflow that you'll be able to find on a post I'll link later. But this is, I think that many teams wait too long to actually ship their AI product to like 1% of users and just get that feedback sooner. It's okay if you're getting the signal that the AI product isn't performing really well, as long as you're measuring that faster and getting that feedback sooner to be able to improve on your system. And that's where the opportunity for collaboration really is. It's in the engineers that are building the system to feel like they have their PM has their back, to actually trust that they're building a system that works and can measure the output and improve when things go wrong. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the third workflow and we're going to get into the nitty-gritty a little bit more, which is evals in development and production. So now you've built the AI product, you have evals that can help you iterate, toxicity, business proxies, correctness, you're measuring it all, it's looking great. The system actually does what it's supposed to do, and the evals are trustworthy and you actually can rely on them. Well, now you hit ship, and the system works for more users, but you're still going to have users that complain. This is just the nature of product management. You're always going to have users that didn't like that end product experience for some reason. Well, that's an opportunity to then take a look at your data, look at the input and the output, look at the labels like the eval label, and see do they match up with your human label or business metric or not. And based on that, you can actually take that row of data, add it to a data set, and use it to improve or iterate on your eval system or on your agent in the first place. And this is the reality of what evals and development and production look like. It's a constant loop of flagging where your system isn't performing well and then iterating based on those examples. The reality is that you can't do any of this without observability. So observability and evals are actually tied hand in hand. If anyone is trying to sell you on an eval product and they don't support open source, open telemetry, based observability. It doesn't have to be open telemetry, but like some open source standard of observability, you're going to get locked in and you're going to have a bad time. And the reality is that you can't do evals without observability. I'm all for logging your data to spreadsheets and like taking a look at your data in a spreadsheet, but it's just not going to scale across your entire product or team once you have multiple users looking at data, getting more feedback from your end users. So observability is really important to think about from your eval system as well. This is sort of one quick loop of what this looks like and some of the buzzwords. It's a good slide to sort of screenshot of like what are some buzzwords on things you might want to think about when you're developing an eval system, which is data sets, thinking about the type of data that you can support. Data sets are really just collections of data, being able to use data sets for iteration. We talked a lot about offline evals, but that LLM as a judge that we're developing, we need to be able to use it online as well. And so we actually want the same eval to run on all incoming data that's being created. And the data that it runs on top of is called traces or spans. And so this is sort of a loop. This is sort of like the product version of that loop I showed earlier as well. A couple of quick tidbits on what this looks like in a product, kind of productized way. These are a couple of screenshots from Arize, but really you can think about this from like the foundation of any product or tool that you're looking at for observability and evals. But this is the unit that your team, your engineering team is going to use for actually measuring their end work, which is they're going to look at traces. They're going to look at spans. This is the common terminology that's used by engineers to determine how their agent is performing. And spans basically think of this as just a row of data. It's just columns and a row of data. And that's what you see here represented on the left. It's just rows of data with a hierarchy or sequence. And this is basically what an agent graph looks like. This is an agent actually executing on a task. And you can see that underneath it, there's all of these more complex calls being made. Why this is helpful is because you can run evals on any part of the graph, and you can measure things like agent trajectory. You can see here as a trace eval, which is across all of the rows for a single execution. Or you can see at the span level or at the individual interaction level, is the user frustrated or not? So evals are attached to the traces and spans that you see here. They're sort of extra columns on top of the individual rows of spans. You can also run evals on sessions, which are collections of traces. So multiple back and forths from a user and an AI agent, that comprises of a session. and you can actually measure the overall performance of an agent across multiple traces in a session as well. This is sort of one more visualization for observability, which I like to show, which is looking at the agent holistically. This means basically looking at maybe multiple multi-agent or sub-agent systems where agents can call out to other agents at aggregate. And you can see here that this is basically an agent that has a tool call and then it calls other tools to basically make a determination for being able to do a lookup on some data analysis. And so how your agent actually looks and the architecture is taking can make a difference on things like the end user product experience. For instance, a multi-agent system that's parallelized means that it can make calls in parallel versus in sequence. And so it's going to be faster to execute across multiple API calls than if you put all of these in one single row and they were making calls in serial. And so these are some of the architectural trade-offs that your team is going to make when you provide requirements around what the agent needs to do. Is this a LangGraph type of a workflow? Yes, it is. It's in the sense that LangGraph also is a sort of agent builder. There's also many other agent builders out there, depending on the framework that you're building in, like Crew AI, Mastra, and a number of others as well. The best part is observability and eval should be agnostic of whatever framework you're using for building. So what you see here, it doesn't really matter which framework you're building in. The reality is, I think tomorrow there's every, 6 months, there's going to be a new agent framework. Your observability and evals product, whatever you're using for observability, should be agnostic of that. It should be able to take whatever is working off the shelf, whatever your team might want to use, and adopt and adapt to that system as well. Those LLM as a judge prompts that I showed you earlier, this is an example of what it looks like to set one up, which is being able to run an LLM as a judge. We use the term running because it's making a call to an API, but it's really just an API call to an LLM system. And you're basically passing this prompt to that LLM and you're telling it, hey, run on this data. And the data, in many cases, is just that span. But like we mentioned before, you can also run evals on multiple spans, which are a trace. So it kind of makes up that tree that you saw earlier, or a session, which could be multiple traces. And so you can run evals at multiple levels. And that's really helpful to help you debug, just like from that graph I showed earlier, of if you're thinking about evals from a session or a user level, you can drill deeper and deeper to look at, okay, where exactly are things breaking? Where is there an opportunity to improve on our system? And then this part is really important, which is from a requirement standpoint for PMs to think about annotations. And annotations are, remember, one of the most important parts of the eval workflow. They're actually how you're creating the label that you're using for LLM as a judge in the first place. And they allow you to create data sets to take a look at further. There's this term that's used often called golden data sets. Your team might maybe have already used this as well. I really think that golden data sets are three types of data set. They're regression data sets, which are basically whenever you make a change to your system to fix a really hard problem, you use a regression data set to make sure you're not regressing on really hard examples that you fixed already. That's what the term regression means. It's sort of like a unit test. There's also random sample, which is like, think of this as like a nominal example of a grab bag of data that you would get in a single day or a single week. And this you can kind of think of as like a baseline data set. How does your agent perform, on average in the randomness of the world? It can still be a golden data set, even though it's a random sample. The fact that it's golden just means that the quality of the data set is high, is that there's a team that you work together with or collaborated on to have high quality labels on your data set. And then last but not least, there's failure mode data sets. So these are what your team aspires to go and fix. These are the hard examples that might be super valuable. Think about it from like a legal chatbot example. Let's say you're building a legal chatbot. Maybe it's really good at answering basic legal questions, right? Like what is, give me, pull this law for me or pull this statute. But what if you're asking really specific nuanced questions about a case? And the agent, how are you measuring the quality of the agent in those cases? The thing is that usually really hard examples oftentimes are correlated with value. So it's really important to measure, hey, we want to be really good at this specific use case, which is answering questions about, I don't know, I'm butchering the legal example here, but like answering questions about where are there flaws in the case. and we want to build a data set of people asking those questions that we're not performing well on, and we want to make the agent work really well for those cases. That's a failure mode data set. So those are the three types of data set that you'll often see getting built. It's regression, random sample, and failure. And those can all be golden data sets as well. Those data sets are really helpful for iterating on evals and on your prompting system, which is taking a data set, a data set is just, think of it as like a CSV with multiple rows. And you're taking that data set, which has the input, the output, and a prompt template. And you might want to change something about your system, like the prompt itself. And that's where you want to be able to experiment on new versions of the prompt. For instance, adding a row in your customer support bot prompt that says, always ask follow-up questions if you don't know the answer versus just answering anyway. That's a prompt change. And if you want to validate that that prompt change actually worked, you use a data set in a playground to iterate on the prompt. And then you can also see here, it's a really small call out here, but you can run evals on top of the output as well. These are the same evals that you're using for experimentation, right? This is what your team is using to iterate on top of. So this is how you can make sure that you're kind of quantitatively improving on your eval, on your agent system by using data sets, prompt iteration, and evals together. That's what gives you that confidence that the changes that you're making are actually sticking. This is an example of what that looks like in an experimentation chart. There's a little bit of a gap in the middle here, but you can see that, maybe in this case, the person is trying to drive down or drive up the corrective actions here, and they're iterating on the prompt to really see the changes that their prompts are making or the change to the LLM. You can really change like three things here. It's changing the prompt, which is the static system prompt message. It's changing the context or the data that's pulled in. You can also change the model, which is whichever model you want to use for the system. It's actually a fourth change you can make as well, which is to your tools. So you can change if it's an agent system, how the tool calling works, what tools are being called, when certain tools are being called. Again, a lot of this is covered in that deep learning course. So if you want to dive deeper, I highly recommend checking that out. We go into each of those changes and sort of measure how to improve on your evals based on those changes you can make to your system. So to round it out a little bit here, a quick FAQ. You can use the same LLM for generation as you do for judging. The reason that that works, and we've done some research on this, is because you're assigning a different role to that LLM when it comes to measuring the output of the system versus just generating data or generating tokens. So you can use GPT-4o to evaluate GPT-4o as well. There is a little bit of a slight bias that we have measured for certain models, and there's a paper that we have that we've actually posted from Aparna's Twitter, who's our CPO, on some of the research that we've done in this area. So if you're interested, feel free to check that out and share it with your team. LLM as a judge will never be 100% correct technique. Even in the examples I showed earlier, you're still going to have the agent or the LLM as a judge do things incorrectly. But the goal really of this system is to be able to catch when things are going wrong or incorrect and use them for iteration. And that's why observability is so important. I highly recommend starting with the best models initially to align closely with human judgment before trying to go to cheaper or faster models. It's just going to get you more reliable results before you try to cut costs. And then always use discrete classification labels, never use scores. So this is like incorrect versus correct, or even defining the quality of something in form of words like good, very bad, and then examples for what each of those mean in the prompt versus give me a score from 1 to 10 from the LLM. The reason for that is because LLMs are still not very good with numbers. And so even if you think about it from a human standpoint, if I give a human that task, like give me, a hallucination score from 1 to 10, and I give that task to three different humans, I'm going to get three different numbers because humans don't even know how to coalesce around the same score either. What you can do is take that label and map it to a score. And so you still get a score at the end of the day, like correct is 1, incorrect is 0 points, but you should always use a label, correct or incorrect. It's also really helpful to get an explanation from the LLM as a judge to help you understand why it's giving a certain label. So that gives you a way to actually go back and improve on the system. So just remember, just a quick recap here. We've talked about a lot, but we've really tried to cover three workflows, three AI PM archetypes, and three questions to ask your team. Which AI PM persona you are or archetype you are, that's kind of depends on where you might be focusing. And again, I think these will probably start to merge as time goes on. There's three workflows. Every company is in one of these three. I urge you to think about benchmarking where you're at, whether you're vibe coding and vibe checking, writing an eval but not really able to trust it, or doing evals actually truly in development and production. And then there's three questions to ask your team. How many labels do we need? What happens when the eval is good, but the human label disagrees anyway? What happens when the eval is good, but the business metric goes down anyway? So looking ahead, I think we've kind of spent a lot of time on the technicals and the details here, but you can kind of view this as a shift that's happening in organizations, which is PMs are starting to have to shift right a little bit more, which is maybe shift left. I don't remember what the term is, but shift closer to engineering. And that's using tools like prototyping tools like Cursor. It's using tools like Arize to help you do engineering and run evals. And really, this is also an opportunity for those teams, for AI engineers, to get closer to the customer side too. So I kind of view this as an opportunity for teams to collaborate more closely together and speak a common language in the form of spans, evals, observability, and actually be able to communicate more clearly what a specific problem is and how to fix it. If you like this and you want to look at more workflows and you want to get deeper on some workflows like this, feel free to scan the QR code. I tend to post these. There's a free video with basically covering some of this workflow with Hamel, who is one of our partners and friends, where we talk about this in more length and he kind of shares his perspective as well from an AI engineering perspective. The QR code will take you to my Substack, which is free to subscribe to, and it's one of the videos there, along with another video on eval workflows as well. So there's a lot of content around how to develop and design, kind of make yourself kind of up level as an AI PM by sharing what we try to do day to day in our job at Arize as well. And then a little bit of what's coming up next. We're going to cover more case studies from real world AI PMs beyond just myself and customers that we work with. So I'm excited to share more there in the coming months. We're going to share learnings from our product teams on how we built our own AI product and agent as well, and the future of where we think things are going to go with AI engineering and product management. A small hint there is self-improving agents. And you can kind of see that this actually starts to look like two loops, right? We've talked a lot about improving agents using evals, but there's also a whole loop around improving the evals using the same workflows as well. And so these are actually tied together. And if you're interested and want to follow along, Maggie just dropped a couple of links in the chat. So I highly recommend you check that out. And by staying subscribed on this list, you'll be able to get those updates as well for when we host those next webinars. I'm excited to share those. They're going to be a lot of fun to hear from real world AI PMs as well. But with that, thank you so much for joining and thank you for your time. Really enjoyed sharing a little bit more about our workflows here.